Let's talk a little about Stefan Molyneux. I did one upload on this channel called Stefan Molyneux is Wrong About Everything, and then I guess this is just kind of a continuation. Stefan Molyneux is still wrong about everything. I've been watching a few more of his uploads, and I do have to once again begin with some credit, give credit where credit is due. He debated a flat earther, and he said that the earth is not flat, so I give him credit for that. He also debated a creationist, and he said that evolution is real, so I give him credit for that. But now to give a little bit of pushback. I was watching the debates that Stefan Molyneux did with Jordan Peterson, and we would call them debates. These were more just like friendly exchanges. I saw a couple of those, and what I thought was very interesting was that Stefan Molyneux was being very cozy with Peterson, most likely because both of them are sort of, well, let's face it, YouTube web-celebrities. However, Stefan Molyneux seems to be all about eliminating deities on the one hand, and I believe that was even something to do with a book he wrote once, and then Jordan Peterson is quite the opposite. He's all saying that, people have belief systems, and at the zenith of your belief system is God, but Stefan Molyneux is giving him zero challenge on anything like that. He's sort of just giving Jordan Peterson a free pass when it comes to the maps of meaning stuff and not delivering the sort of critical, the necessary criticism that he would normally give to probably anybody else. And you might be wondering, well, Jordan Peterson's take on spirituality and belief systems is probably a little bit different, but in reality, though, I would say that Stefan Molyneux could have really challenged him on a lot of things, and I thought he was just simply catering to an individual who has a large YouTube following, and he doesn't want to get into a fierce debate with Peterson because he was afraid of his YouTube followers going down. He doesn't want to offend some. He doesn't want to sort of turn off his followers by saying some bad things about somebody that they also probably like. Now, is Stefan Molyneux a genuine believer in what he says? Well, he's really scaled down a lot of the libertarian rhetoric that he was talking about earlier on in his career. And, there are videos from him 9-10 years ago talking about ending the state in 30 days or whatever the fuck that was. But then, when he's debating a guy like Adam Kokesh, he's saying all of these enormous big government things, and he's saying all of these things that are just in line with the current American administration. He's for building the wall. He's for banning the bans on immigration. I mean, those are big government things that seem to be contrary to a lot of the things that he used to talk about years ago, and Adam Kokesh calls him out for that. It's a very interesting debate that they had, Adam Kokesh and Stefan Molyneux, but even, once again, to give credit where credit is due, Stefan Molyneux greatly outclassed him because he's a much larger sense of finesse in that debate, but there was that just giant question. It's like, all of the things that you used to be opposed to now, talking about build that wall and just the travel bans, you're for all of those things. What it really seems like Stefan Molyneux is, he's just somebody that kind of puts his viewpoint in line with whatever is popular for the online communities. And what he sort of recognized in the past was, okay, these libertarian things are hot-button issues that are very popular with large demographics. All right, now the Trump material is very popular with large demographics. And there's nothing wrong with being a libertarian. There's nothing wrong with being a Trump supporter. And there's nothing wrong with even changing your ideology. I mean, we all make changes in our sort of political beliefs from time to time. We learn new things. But there's a very big difference between just learning something new that allows you to get some more insight into a different position and deliberately skewing your perspective and deliberately changing your worldview to try and pull in a new YouTube demographic into your audience. Those things are quite different. One of them is genuine, the other one is fraudulent. With Stefan Molyneux, I can only gather that it's the latter, that he is indeed someone who doesn't actually believe the things he says, and the only thing that he genuinely believes is he enjoys being the center of attention, the spotlight, and hosting his own little whatever the heck is that he does. But I don't believe that he is, putting out genuine material. He says very clearly in a lot of his uploads that he studies statistics and demographics, and he can rattle off, a lot of the things about these people are more likely to buy this type of book, these people are more likely to favor small government, and just it's only young males and married women and stuff like that that favor small government. I mean, he studies all the demographics and the statistics, so he is someone who has the ability to calculate what he has to say to get a YouTube following, and he appears to be someone who did just that. I mean, like, he's very, very open about, how he learns the material. Well, why on earth do you think that he's being genuine? Especially when you notice a very, very calculated change in ideology. Once you sort of see that, okay, libertarian stuff was getting me a lot of views in the past. Okay, now Trump supporting is what I need to do to make my following even larger. And all of these things, that, I really have to stress, though, a lot of the stuff that he endorses in the current day and age, and even like the quote-unquote alt-right stuff, although I don't think he identifies as alt-right deliberately, he's more treated as being a gateway drug into the alt-right. That type of material is really something that is just totally done for the sake of popularity, but he's putting that stuff out there because he knows this is what he has to do to stay in the business with these other intellectual dark web people / alt-right people. I don't think those two groups are the same thing, but those two groups, this is what he has to do to compete with other people who are putting out YouTube content about similar material. So he studies the demographics, and he puts out some type of crap that he doesn't genuinely believe. And, there's a reason why people are accusing Stefan Molyneux of cult leadership as opposed to many of the other people on the internet. Like, you don't hear Ben Shapiro running a cult. You don't even hear people like Jared Taylor running a cult or something like that. Yes, they have organizations, or yes, they host shows, but what is the big deal with Stefan Molyneux? Well, he's somebody who learns how to manipulate people in large groups, and I don't think anyone should ever take that to someone like him too seriously. He's a YouTuber. He is some type of web show host or something. I mean, I'm not even sure where you would listen to Freedomain radio or whatever the fuck that is. I mean, I've only ever heard his YouTube uploads because, to be honest, the material isn't that good. No, I mean, I do genuinely mean that. It's he has a very nice delivery. He has a lot of finesse when he's talking. He has that Irish-Canadian accent that is very attractive. I mean, yeah, okay, I'm just being honest. So he really sounds like he is much more knowledgeable on a lot of the subjects that he's talking about. But in reality, this is probably just somebody that is learning how to manipulate people in large groups because it gets him money, and it gets him fame, and it gets him notoriety. Notoriety is probably the biggest one, recognition for ideas, and oh wow, he's a brilliant person. And someone introduced him at one of his libertarian functions years ago about how, people are going to look back in 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, and they're just going to be looking at, well, who was the great philosopher of our time? The way we look at people like, Descartes, and we look at people like Voltaire. Well, they're going to be looking back to Stefan Molyneux 200 years from now. He's going to be one of the great thinkers of this time. And that's obviously not true. I mean, you're going to look back and just be like, hey, this is some guy who read a bunch of YouTube analytics and learned how to manipulate his audience. That's what they're going to be remembering him for, if he's ever remembered at all. I would really have to say that the people in the intellectual dark web are probably not going to survive forever. I mean, even someone like Milo Yiannopoulos is no longer relevant to anything. But no, these guys are just web hosts, and that's what we really have to recognize them. And we've been very critical of Stefan Molyneux from the previous upload, talking about his support of Aristotle, which was not deserved, his support of Voltaire, which is just oligarch propaganda in disguise. And I just wish that, I wish that a lot of people would kind of read between the lines and just recognize that it's something that Dave Smalley, who hosts the show Dogma Debates, sort of mentioned about how people often get caught up in, it's not that they're digesting the material and understanding what someone is saying. It's more just this is somebody who has a charismatic personality and, maybe even sort of an alluring voice or something like that, that is just getting people to go along with what they're saying. It's just someone just has a very good sense of persuasion, and Scott Adams talks about this a lot in the book Win Bigly and a lot of his lectures, or, well, not really lectures, his master classes, I guess he calls them that, when it's just talking about how, convincing people with certain persuasion tactics. That's what Stefan Molyneux is, and we talked a little bit more about the substance material in the previous one, and we mentioned Aristotle and Voltaire already about how I don't agree with his sort of arguments on those things, but I think that once people sort of just kind of recognize the manipulation tactics, then they're going to learn that this guy isn't everything that he's cracked up to be. And furthermore, it's like, he did that debate with the creationist, whose name I believe was Curtis Mullins. I had to learn that from the comments section because he was commenting in there saying that he was the person involved with the debate. I don't think they identified his full name in that one, but a lot of that is just like, people were like, his Stefan Molyneux's own fans were just like, holy crap, he's debating a young earth creationist, and he lost. No, he was actually talking to a rather articulate guy on the subject, and it's just like, someone who doesn't believe in evolution, and he couldn't even give the proper responses, because, it's like, sometimes his things fall apart. I thought, though, Stefan Molyneux did rather well debating a guy from the Flat Earth Society. If you watch Stefan Molyneux's Flat Earth debate, what's it called? The Flat Earth Conspiracy. Yes, it's real, or something like that, whatever the name is. No, he actually did very well, and I thought he did a nice job highlighting some things about how that's more of a belief system as opposed to anything associated with science. People, or anyone who genuinely believes the flat earth theory, feels like they have a message that they need to share to the earth, and they're doing something good, and that's just based on the human concept of believing in, that this is a good thing that we need to do. And I was like, wow, okay, that's kind of profound. Contrary to the title of this thing, I don't think that the guy is wrong about absolutely everything, but there's also a reason why he's accused of cult leadership, and that's because he's just sort of like, when it comes to someone who knows how to manipulate people in large groups, what's the next thing? Cult leadership. Leaving your family of origin. Hey, everybody, abandon everything and just run away with me. Oh, were you spanked as a child? Well, I'm going to be your new daddy, and you're just going to live through my ideas, and then you'll never get spanked again. And all of those sort of particular things. And I really wish, though, that Stefan Molyneux and Jordan Peterson could have had some more intense debate moments, like, Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson had that famous podcast where they talked about truth, which was an absolute disaster, other than 3 or 4 sentences, but I've talked about that in the past. There are 3 or 4 gems, or what is Sam Harris's metaphor that he always talks about, diamonds in the dunghill or something like that. I really wish that Stefan Molyneux and Jordan Peterson would have had something where they really disagreed upon so you could hear them battling. I do recognize that he is someone who has intelligence, but intelligence does not mean that somebody has a point. It doesn't mean that someone is, in the know on every single thing. And it also doesn't mean that someone is genuine. And what a lot of people don't seem to get is when someone is talking about philosophy, because Stefan Molyneux just loves to talk about philosophy, he loves to call himself a philosopher, and, you're going to bring up the Socratic method or something like that. What a lot of people need to recognize is that stuff only works if the person is telling the truth. And if the person is just bullshitting you to get you to watch their damn videos because they get money, fame, and notoriety for it, that's all it is. It's just like, that's the gimmick, that's the scam. And it especially helps, if someone has an attractive Irish-Canadian accent or something where it's like, oh, yeah, okay, maybe I'm just going to stay up all night listening to this stuff, but it's like, when you sort of see something like Stefan Molyneux's debate with Sam Cedar, I watched that thing 2 times, and the first time I saw it, I thought Stefan Molyneux did a really good job, and like later, a couple months later, I saw it again for a second time, and I was just like, holy crap, he did not even defend his own platform well. He's just sort of saying very silly things like, well, it's like we're going to get a bunch of competing agencies that are always going to clean the water, and that the one that has the best reputation is going to clean the water in the best way and stuff like that. And it's just like, what on earth are you talking about? And that's a big thing that libertarians need to recognize on all ends. It's like this whole notion of you're just going to have competing agencies that are going to solve everything. No, absolutely not. I always thought it would be kind of a much more interesting aspect just to view libertarians on kind of the secessionist model, where it's like you would just have a group of people living in sort of an independent territory, an independent area, where it's like every person would be sort of a secessionist, where you just kind of recognize that this property is mine, this little area is mine, and it's not trying to be a community, it's not trying to be a society. It's more just like, we're all just going to be subsistence farmers and stuff like that, and I think that actually might be something that will be a little bit more functional than what Stefan Molyneux was talking about when he says he wants to eradicate the state. And it's like, I mean, he said all that stuff in the past, but then he says other things like he's completely opposed to all those things now if he's going to be talking about building that wall. He supports Trump's decision to build the wall. It's like, well, that's the state in action. And even when I'm listening to his flat earth debate, when he sort of tells somebody that all governments recognize international borders, all governments recognize the concept of the state, the United Nations recognizes all this, they're all tyrants and stuff like that, all of his platform is out the window. I mean, like, he threw it all away because he probably recognized that he could have a larger following, dealing with some things associated with kind of talking about the hot button issues of the Trump era. But when we look at actually some of his libertarian arguments, it's like, once again, I think it's so much easier for libertarians to just sort of say, hey, we're just going to be living in this kind of geographic area. I mean, I think that libertarians could actually make something work if they're going to start with not a country, not a state, but even a county, like one of the counties on the Canadian border or something, like Boundary County, Idaho, Bottineau County, North Dakota, and then they're just sort of like, all right, I mean, we're going to live without any form of government, we're just sort of going to all obey the non-aggression principle and be like, hey, I'm living on this piece of land, I'm going to become a subsistence farmer, maybe I'll have goats, maybe I won't, and then you're just going to be like, I'm just going to live in a self-sufficient, independent manner, and I'm not going to violate the property rights of anybody else. And that's just the way that things are going to go. It's like, I'm going to be completely independent. Then you don't have to ask the questions like, who's going to pay for the roads? And then you don't have to ask the questions like, I mean, who's going to be, contaminating the water? No one's going to be contaminating the water if you're just going to be living in some sort of self-sufficient agricultural lifestyle. It's almost like humanity coming full circle. I mean, I think it'd be so much easier for them just to say things like that, but everything I've heard from Stefan Molyneux, 95% of his libertarian things anyway, it's all about the concept of just having people being in a higher level of moral philosophy, and then you're just having people all obeying the non-aggression principle. So firstly, I mean, they aren't even going to be stealing anything. There's just going to be no crimes. There aren't really going to be the need for prisons in a libertarian society. He was asked that actually in a direct question, though, during his debate with Sam Cedar, which was moderated by Hip Hughes. And they asked him, I believe Hip Hughes asked the question, he's like, in a libertarian society, would you have prisons? And his answer was, I don't know. Yeah, that's brilliant moral philosophy moving forward. I don't know. I mean, like, I think most libertarians say no, but he was just like, I don't know. I mean, I've studied this for 30 years, but I don't have an answer to that very, very fundamental question. Well, anyway, I mean, that's the kind of just nitpicking at some far-off things. Anyway, what do you think? I mean, there are probably a lot of Stefan Molyneux fans out there on the internet, but what do you guys think? Do you have any criticisms that you would say about Stefan Molyneux? Do you agree with some things that he says? Do you disagree with some things that he says? Furthermore, who would you really like to see in a debate with somebody like Stefan Molyneux, or like, what subjects interest you guys? If you have anything to say at all, please drop a comment below, and until next time.